The water off the coast of Positano was impossibly blue, the kind of blue that didn't look real in photographs. Ava Morgan floated on her back, letting the Mediterranean sun warm her face while the gentle waves rocked her like a lullaby. This was exactly what she'd needed. Distance from Boston, from her failed engagement, from the life that had felt like it was strangling her. Here. She was just another tourist, anonymous, free. She'd been in Positano for 3 days, staying at a small hotel perched on the cliffs, spending her mornings swimming and her afternoons wandering the steep streets lined with lemon trees and bougainvillea. It was early, barely past dawn, and she had the beach almost entirely to herself. Just her, the water, and one older woman who'd arrived a few minutes ago and was now wading into the sea about 50 yards down the beach. Ava watched idly as the woman went deeper, admiring her confidence. She looked to be in her early 60s, silver hair pulled back, moving with the ease of someone who knew these waters well. Ava had been a competitive swimmer in college, had worked as a lifeguard during summers, and old habits died hard. She always kept an eye on other swimmers, even when she wasn't on duty. The woman dove under a wave and came up laughing, clearly enjoying herself. Ava smiled and turned her attention back to the sky, planning her day. Maybe she'd hike up to the path of the gods. Maybe she'd just find a cafe and read for hours. The beauty of having no plan was a splash, louder than it should have been. Ava's head snapped toward where the woman had been. She was still there, but something was wrong. Her arms were thrashing, her movements panicked rather than purposeful. Even from this distance, Ava could see the terror in the way she was fighting the water. Training kicked in before conscious thought could catch up. Ava flipped onto her stomach and cut through the water with strong, efficient strokes. The distance closed quickly, 40 yards, 30, 20. She could hear the woman now, gasping and sputtering, trying to call for help, but taking in water instead. "I've got you," Ava shouted as she reached her. "Don't fight me." But panic had already taken over. The woman grabbed at Ava desperately, fingers digging into her shoulders, pushing her under in her desperation to stay afloat. Ava's head went under and water filled her nose and mouth. She kicked hard, breaking the surface, and tried again. "Ma'am, you have to let me." Another hand on her head, pushing her down. This was the dangerous part, the part where scared people could drown their rescuers. Ava dove down deliberately, breaking the woman's grip, and came up behind her. She got her arm across the woman's chest in a proper rescue hold and started kicking toward shore. "Stop fighting," she said firmly in the woman's ear. "I'm a trained lifeguard. I've got you. Just breathe." Whether it was the confidence in Ava's voice or sheer exhaustion, the woman finally went limp, letting herself be towed. It made everything easier. But Ava could feel how labored the woman's breathing was, how she was still coughing up water. The swim back felt endless. Ava's shoulders burned and her legs ached, but she didn't stop, didn't slow down. When her feet finally touched sand, she half-carried, half-dragged the woman onto the beach and laid her on her side. "Can you hear me?" Ava asked, checking her pulse. "Too fast, but strong." "Are you hurt?" The woman coughed violently, expelling sea-ater, and gasped in air. "My leg," she managed. "Cramp so sudden I couldn't." "It's okay. You're safe now. Just keep breathing." Ava stayed with her, one hand on her back, monitoring her breathing until it started to even out. After a few minutes, the woman rolled onto her back, looking up at Ava with dark eyes that were clearing from panic. "You saved my life," she said in accented English. "I thought I was sure I would drown. You're okay now. That's what matters." Ava helped her sit up slowly. "Do you live nearby? Is there someone I can call?" "My son, but he will panic." The woman managed a weak smile. "He does not like when I swim alone." "He's going to like this even less," Ava said. "Riley, you should probably see a doctor. Make sure you didn't aspirate too much water. I am fine, thanks to you." The woman reached out and gripped Ava's hand with surprising strength. "What is your name?" "Ava. Ava Morgan. Serafina Hale." She pressed Ava's hand between both of hers. I owe you my life, Ava Morgan. In my family, such debts are taken very seriously. Something in the way she said it, the formality, the weight, made Ava pause, but she shook it off. The woman had just nearly drowned. Of course she was being dramatic. You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad I was here. Ava helped Francesca to her feet. Are you sure you're okay? Can you walk? Yes. Yes, my car is just there. Serafina gestured to the small parking area. But please, how can I thank you? Your hotel. Can I send something? Really, that's not necessary. I'm just happy you're safe. Ava gathered her towel and bag from where she'd left them up the beach. Take care of yourself, okay? And maybe don't swim alone for a while. Wait, Serafina started. But Ava was already walking away, suddenly desperate to avoid the gratitude and attention. She'd done what anyone would do, what she was trained to do. The last thing she wanted was to be treated like some kind of hero. She made it back to her hotel and into the shower before the adrenaline crash hit. Her hands started shaking as the hot water poured over her, and she had to brace herself against the tile wall. That woman had almost died. If Ava had been looking at the sky for another 30 seconds if she decided to swim in a different direction. But she hadn't, and Serafina was fine. That was all that mattered. Ava spent the rest of the day trying to distract herself, but her mind kept returning to those moments in the water, to the terror in Francesca's eyes, to how close it had been. She fell asleep that night with the sound of waves still echoing in her ears. The next morning, she was having breakfast on her hotel's terrace when the manager approached her table with an expression somewhere between awe and nervousness. Miss Reed, there's someone here to see you. Ava looked up from her cappuccino, confused. To see me? Are you sure? Quite sure. He's waiting in the lobby. Well, you'll see. The manager's odd tone made Ava curious despite herself. She followed him inside to find a man standing near the entrance, and her first thought was that he didn't belong in the small, charming lobby of her modest hotel. He belonged somewhere grander, somewhere that matched his obvious wealth and presence. He was tall, easily over 6', with dark hair that was perfectly styled in that effortlessly expensive way. His suit probably cost more than Ava's entire wardrobe, tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean athletic build, but it was his face that really caught her attention. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw darkened by stubble, and eyes so dark they were almost black. He was handsome in an intimidating way, the kind of handsome that made you nervous. Those dark eyes fixed on her as she entered, and Ava felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. Ava Morgan. His voice was deep with an Italian accent that made her name sound different, more elegant. Yes, and you are Damon Hale. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. You saved my mother's life yesterday morning. Oh no. Ava's stomach dropped. She'd hoped to avoid this exact conversation. Is she okay? I've been worried. She's fine, perfectly healthy, thanks to you. He stopped a few feet away, studying her with an intensity that made her want to fidget. I wanted to thank you personally and to discuss how I can repay such a debt. There's no debt. I did what anyone would do. No. The word was firm, leaving no room for argument. What you did was extraordinary. You risked your life to save a stranger. In my world, such actions create obligations. Your world, Ava thought. What world was that exactly? She studied him more carefully, noting the expensive watch, the way he held himself with absolute confidence, the difference the hotel manager was showing him, and the name Hale. Serafina had said her family took debt seriously. A suspicion formed in her mind. Mr. Hale, I appreciate you coming here, but honestly, I don't need anything. Your mother's safety is all the thanks I need. Nevertheless, I insist. Name your price. There is no price. I'm not interested in payment. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or curiosity. Everyone has a price. Not for this. not for doing the right thing. Ava crossed her arms, suddenly feeling defensive. Look, I'm glad your mother is okay. That's genuinely all I wanted. Now, if you'll excuse me, my breakfast is getting cold. She turned to walk away, but his voice stopped her. You're American, very observant, on vacation, something like that. Alone. Ava turned back to face him, raising an eyebrow. Is this an interrogation? No, I'm simply trying to understand you. He tilted his head slightly, still watching her with that unnerving focus. You save a woman's life and want nothing in return. You're in one of the most beautiful places in Italy, alone. You're running from something. That's presumptuous, but accurate. Damn it. He was right, and she hated that he could read her so easily. My personal life is none of your business. Perhaps not, but my mother wants to thank you properly. She's invited you to dinner at our home tomorrow evening. He pulled a card from his jacket pocket and held it out. 7. Oh. A car will pick you up. I don't think. Please. The word softened his commanding tone slightly. It would mean a great deal to her and to me. Ava found herself taking the card, even though every instinct told her this was a bad idea. Fine. Dinner? But after that, we're even. Deal. A small smile curved his lips, and it transformed his face from intimidating to devastating. Deal. He left as smoothly as he'd arrived, and Ava stood in the lobby holding his card and wondering what she'd just agreed to. The card was heavy, expensive stock with just a name and phone number embossed in silver. No title, no business name, just Damon Hale. She spent the rest of the day trying to convince herself that going to dinner was a terrible idea. She looked up the Hale name online and found almost nothing, which in itself was telling. People with money and power who didn't want to be found usually had good reasons for their privacy. The few mentions she did find suggested the family was involved in import, export, and various business interests in Campa, which could mean anything, or it could mean exactly what Ava suspected it meant. But she'd made a promise, and despite her better judgment, she was curious about the intense man with the dark eyes who looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The next evening, a sleek black car arrived exactly at 7. The driver was polite but silent, and Ava watched the coastal road wind higher into the hills above Positano. The views were spectacular, the sea spreading endlessly to the horizon, the town below glowing in the early evening light. The Hale home was not what she expected. It was beautiful, certainly, a sprawling villa with terracotta roof tiles and walls covered in flowering vines, but it was also somehow warm and welcoming rather than ostentatiously wealthy. It felt like a home, not a showpiece. Damon met her at the door, dressed more casually than before in dark pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Ava tried not to notice the way the shirt emphasized his olive skin and the strength of his forearms, or the way her pulse kicked up when he smiled at her. Slow, thank you for coming. Thanks for inviting me. She'd agonized over what to wear and had finally settled on a simple sundress, nice enough to be respectful, but not trying too hard. From the way Damon's eyes traveled over her, lingering just long enough to be noticeable, she'd made the right choice. My mother is in the garden. She's been looking forward to this all day. He led her through the villa, and Ava couldn't help noticing the details. Family photos on the walls, comfortable furniture that showed signs of actual use, fresh flowers everywhere. This was a home where people lived and loved, not just a display of wealth. The garden was terraced into the hillside with lemon trees and roses and herbs growing in wild profusion. Serafina sat at a table under a pergola covered in wisteria, and her face lit up when she saw Ava. My angel. She rose and pulled Ava into an embrace that smelled of jasmine perfume and something baking. You came. I was afraid you would refuse. How could I refuse after everything? Ava returned the hug, genuinely happy to see that Serafina looked healthy and vibrant. Come sit. We eat soon, but first wine and conversation. Serafina patted the chair beside her, and Damon took the seat across from them, pouring deep red wine into crystal glasses. The evening was magical in a way Ava hadn't expected. Serafina was warm and funny, telling stories about raising Damon and managing the family businesses after her husband died. Damon was more reserved, but had a dry wit that made Ava laugh. The food was incredible. Course after course of perfectly prepared Italian dishes that Serafina had cooked herself. "You did all this?" Ava asked, overwhelmed by the spread. "Of course. How else do I show my gratitude?" Francesca reached over and squeezed her hand. "You gave me more time. Time with my son, with my future grandchildren, with this life I love. No amount of food can repay that, but I try. It's wonderful, all of it." As the meal progressed, Ava found herself relaxing despite her initial weariness. Serafina drew out stories about her life in Boston, her swimming career, the way she'd ended up in Italy after her engagement fell apart. "He was fool," Serafina declared when Ava mentioned her ex-fiancé. "Any man who lets you go is fool." Damon had been quiet for most of this part of the conversation, but his eyes never left Ava's face. She could feel the weight of his attention even when she wasn't looking at him, and it made her hyper-aware of every movement, every word. When Serafina excused herself to get dessert, despite both Ava's and Damon's protests, Ava found herself alone with him for the first time since the hotel lobby. "Your mother is wonderful," she said, suddenly nervous. "She is, and she's right. Your ex-fiancé was a fool." The compliment delivered in that deep voice with that steady gaze made heat rise in Ava's cheeks. "You don't even know what happened. I don't need to. I can see what he lost. You're very direct." "I don't see the point in being otherwise. Life is too short for games." He leaned forward slightly. "You intrigue me, Ava Morgan. Beautiful American who saves lives and asks for nothing. Who runs from a broken engagement but still smiles like she believes in happiness. Who are you? I could ask you the same thing. You're not exactly an open book. What do you want to know? What you do? Why your mother spoke about debt so seriously? Why you looked up a stranger and tracked her down just to say thank you? I run the family business, shipping, imports, some real estate." "As for debts," he paused, choosing his words carefully. "My family has always believed in honor, in repaying what we owe, and I didn't track you down just to say thank you. I tracked you down because I wanted to meet the woman brave enough to risk her life for my mother." It wasn't quite an answer, but Ava let it go. She had her suspicions about what family business meant, but in this moment, with the scent of jasmine in the air and the warmth of wine in her veins, she didn't want to push. Serafina returned with tiramisu and espresso, and the conversation turned lighter. But Ava remained acutely aware of Damon's presence across the table, the way he watched her, the small smile that played at his lips when she laughed at his mother's stories. When the evening finally ended and Damon walked her to the car, Ava felt strangely reluctant to leave. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "It was lovely." "It doesn't have to end here." Her heart did a small flip. "What do you mean? Have dinner with me tomorrow night." "Just the two of us." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because you're dangerous," she thought. "Because I can feel myself wanting to say yes, and that terrifies me. Because I don't know you, and because I'm only here for another week. All the more reason to say yes. A week is long enough to get to know someone and short enough that there's no pressure." He stepped closer, and Ava had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "I want to show you my Positano, the places tourists don't see." "Let me." She should say no. Every rational part of her brain screamed that getting involved with a man like Damon Hale, mysterious, powerful, probably dangerous, was a terrible idea. But she was so tired of being rational, of being careful, of protecting herself from every possible risk. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Dinner tomorrow." His smile was slow and satisfied. "I'll pick you up at 7B. As the car drove her back to her hotel, Ava touched her fingers to her lips, which were tingling with the memory of how close he'd stood. What was she doing? She'd come to Italy to find herself, not to get swept up in some romantic fantasy with a man who looked at her like he wanted to devour her. But God, the way he'd looked at her, like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen, like she was worth pursuing, worth knowing, worth everything. Maybe one dinner wouldn't hurt. Maybe she could have this one perfect evening and then go back to her safe, careful life in Boston with a beautiful memory. Even as she thought it, she knew she was lying to herself. One dinner with Damon Hale was never going to be enough. The next evening, Damon arrived at her hotel in a classic convertible that looked like something from a movie, all sleek lines and vintage Italian elegance. He got out to open her door, and Ava tried not to stare. He was wearing dark pants and a charcoal shirt that made his dark eyes look even darker, and the late sun caught the silver at his temples. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the way his gaze traveled over her sundress made her skin warm. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He smiled and held the car door open. "Shall we?" They drove north along the coast with the top down, the wind catching Ava's hair and the sea stretching endlessly beside them. Damon drove with easy confidence, one hand on the wheel, completely at home on the winding coastal road. "Where are we going?" Ava asked, having to raise her voice slightly over the wind. "You'll see. It's a surprise." They ended up in a small village so tiny Ava would never have found it on her own. Just a cluster of buildings perched on a cliff with a small harbor far below. Damon parked and led her down a steep path cut into the rock face, and Ava's breath caught when she saw what was at the bottom. A tiny restaurant, barely more than a few tables on a wooden deck that extended out over the water. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange and pink, and the reflection off the sea was almost too beautiful to be real. "How did you find this place?" Ava breathed. "I've known about it since I was a child. My father used to bring me here." He held out a chair for her at the table closest to the water. "The owner is a friend. He doesn't advertise, doesn't take reservations from tourists. But for me, he makes an exception. I feel like I should be taking pictures or something, proof that places this beautiful actually exist. No pictures, just experience it. Be here." So she did. She let herself sink into the moment. The gentle sound of waves against the supports below them, the warmth of the fading sun on her shoulders, the way the light caught Damon's face and made him look almost unbearably handsome. They ordered simply: fresh fish, local wine, bread still warm from the oven, and they talked, really talked. Not small talk or polite getting-to-know-you questions, but real conversation. Damon asked about her swimming career, and she told him about the discipline it required, the early mornings and aching muscles, the way the water had always been her sanctuary. "Is that why you were swimming that morning?" he asked. "For sanctuary?" "Maybe. Everything felt complicated, and the water makes everything simple. It's just you and the movement and the rhythm." She took a sip of wine. "Why did your mother say your family takes debt seriously?" When she said it, it sounded like more than just gratitude, because it is. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "My family has certain traditions, codes we live by. Honor, loyalty, the settling of debts. When someone saves a life in our family, that creates a bond, an obligation. That sounds very formal. It is, but it's also how we've survived for generations." He paused. "You want to ask about the family business? Ask." Ava met his eyes. "What is it really? Not the official version. We handle things that need handling, resolve disputes, provide protection, manage interests that require discretion." His gaze never wavered. "I won't lie to you, Ava. My world isn't always clean or legal, but we have rules. We don't hurt innocents. We don't deal in certain things, and we protect what's ours." So, yurt, she couldn't quite say it. Mafia is such an American word. We prefer to think of ourselves as a family business with traditional values. A slight smile. "But yes, I suppose that's what you'd call it." Ava should have been scared, should have made an excuse and left. But instead, she just looked at him, this dangerous, beautiful man who'd been nothing but respectful to her, and said, Okay, I appreciate the honesty, and I—" She hesitated, then decided to match his directness. "I still want to be here with you. Is that crazy?" "Perhaps, but I'm glad." The food arrived and they ate as the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the sky turned deep purple. Damon told her stories about growing up in this region, about his father who died when he was 23, about taking over the family business too young and learning the hard way how to lead. "Do you like it?" Ava asked. "What you do?" "I'm good at it. Whether I like it is a more complicated question." He poured more wine. "I like the parts that matter, protecting my family, providing for people who depend on me, maintaining order. The rest," he shrugged, "is necessary. That sounds lonely." "It can be. Trust is a rare commodity in my world, which makes what you did for my mother even more remarkable. You had no reason to trust her, no reason to risk yourself, but you did anyway. I told you I did what anyone would do." "Yes." "But Ava, most people wouldn't have. They would have looked away or called for help and let someone else handle it. You didn't hesitate. You just acted. That kind of courage is rare." The way he was looking at her made Ava's breath catch, like she was something precious, something worth protecting. She'd spent the last 6 months feeling broken and discarded after her fiancé had decided he wanted something different, which had turned out to mean someone different. But Damon looked at her like she was exactly what he wanted. "Why are you really here?" she asked quietly. "Having dinner with me?" "You thanked me. Your mother thanked me. You could have just let me be because I wanted to know you, because the moment I saw you in that hotel lobby, I knew you were going to be important." He reached across the table and traced one finger along the back of her hand. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since my mother told me what you did. And because his dark eyes held hers, I wanted to see if you felt it too." "Felt what?" "This." His thumb brushed over her knuckles. "Tell me you don't feel it." She couldn't because she did feel it. The pull between them, the electricity that sparked every time he looked at her, the way her heart raced when he smiled. It was irrational and probably reckless, but it was undeniably real. "I feel it," she admitted. "Good." His smile was satisfied. "Then let's stop pretending this is just a polite thank you dinner and admit what it actually is." "What is it?" "The beginning of something, if you want it to be." Ava thought about her safe life in Boston, her careful plans, the way she'd always chosen security over risk, predictability over passion. And look where that had gotten her. Engaged to a man who'd found her boring, living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Maybe it was time to try something different, to choose the risk for once. "I want it to be," she said. The drive back to her hotel felt different, charged with possibility and unspoken promises. Damon kept one hand on the wheel and one on her knee, and Ava couldn't stop looking at him, memorizing the line of his profile against the starlit sky. When they pulled up to her hotel, he walked her to the entrance but didn't try to come inside. Instead, he turned her to face him, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I want to kiss you," he said, his voice low. "But not yet. Not until you're sure this is what you want. Because once I start, Ava, I won't want to stop." The promise in his words sent heat pooling low in her stomach. "What if I'm already sure? Then tomorrow I'll show you more of my world, and the day after that, and the day after that, until you run out of time here and have to decide what comes next." That sounds like a plan. It's a warning. "I don't do casual, Ava. When I want something, I pursue it completely, and I want you." She should have been intimidated by the intensity of his declaration. Instead, she felt desired in a way she'd never experienced before. Wanted not despite her strength and independence, but because of it. "Then I guess I should warn you too," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "I don't do casual either, and I don't let people tell me what to do." His laugh was low and genuine. "I wouldn't expect anything less." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, lingering just long enough to make her want more. "Sleep well, Ava. I'll see you tomorrow." She watched him drive away and then floated up to her room, feeling like she was living in someone else's life, a better, braver version of herself who said yes to handsome, dangerous men and didn't worry about consequences. The next 5 days were a blur of sensations and moments that Ava knew she'd remember for the rest of her life. Damon was true to his word. He showed her his Positano, his Italy. Not the tourist version, but the real thing. He took her to his mother's family village in the hills, where old women in black dresses sat in doorways and called out greetings, where the local priest blessed them and the baker gave them still warm bread. He showed her the house where he'd grown up, the room where he'd hidden when his parents fought, the garden where his father was buried. They spent an afternoon on his boat, not the yacht Ava had expected, but a classic wooden sailing vessel that required actual skill to operate. Damon let her take the helm, standing behind her with his arms bracketing hers on the wheel, his chest warm against her back as he murmured instructions in her ear. They climbed to the path of the gods at sunrise and watched the light paint the coast golden pink. They ate at tiny family restaurants where everyone knew Damon's name and treated Ava like she belonged. They walked through Lemminger and nothing, and through it all there was the building tension. The way his hand would linger on her waist, the way he'd look at her mouth when she was talking, the stolen moments of contact that left her aching for more. He was deliberately taking his time, letting anticipation build, and it was driving her crazy in the best possible way. On the fourth evening, they had dinner at his villa again, but this time Serafina was visiting friends and they were alone. Damon cooked for her, a simple pasta with fresh seafood that somehow tasted like everything good about Italy distilled into one dish. They ate on the terrace as the sun set, and Ava couldn't remember ever feeling more content, more herself, more alive. "I leave in 3 days," she said quietly, voicing the reality they'd both been avoiding. "I know. I don't know what to do about that." Damon sat down his wine glass and looked at her seriously. "You have a life in Boston, a job, friends, family. I understand that. But I'm not ready for this to end, and I don't think you are either. I'm not. But Damon, you live here. I live there. How would that even work? You could stay longer, extend your trip. I can't. I have to get back to work. I have—" She stopped. Did she have responsibilities? Her personal training clients could manage without her for a while. Her apartment lease was month to month. Her family wouldn't care if she stayed away longer. "I have a life there," she finished weakly. "Do you? Or do you have the structure of a life that you've been following without asking yourself if it's what you actually want?" The question hit harder than she expected because he was right. She'd built a perfectly acceptable life in Boston. But acceptable wasn't the same as fulfilling. She'd been going through the motions, waiting for something to change, never quite happy, but never unhappy enough to make a change. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "I'm suggesting you give yourself permission to want something different, to choose something that scares you." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Stay in Italy. Not forever, not with any promises or expectations. Just stay a while longer. See where this goes. That's crazy, perhaps, but so is flying home and spending the rest of your life wondering what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to stay." Ava looked at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was tracing circles on her skin, and felt the pull of possibility. What if she did stay? What if she gave herself permission to live spontaneously for once, to follow her heart instead of her careful plans? "I'd need to make some calls," she heard herself say. "Arrange things." Is that a yes? It's a maybe, a probably. I. She looked up and met his eyes. "I want to stay. I want to see where this goes, but I'm terrified." "Good. That means it matters." He stood and pulled her to her feet, drawing her close. "Be terrified. Be brave. Be here with me." And then finally he kissed her. It started soft, a gentle press of lips, a question more than a demand. But when Ava sighed and melted into him, when her hands came up to grip his shoulders, something shifted. The kiss deepened, became urgent and consuming. His hand slid into her hair, tilting her head to change the angle, and Ava pressed closer, desperate to eliminate any space between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damon rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Please, Ava, stay." "Okay," she breathed. I'll stay. His smile was brilliant and relieved, and then he was kissing her again, walking her backward through the French doors into the villa. They made it as far as the living room before Ava's back hit the wall and Damon's mouth moved to her neck, her shoulder, the curve of her collarbone. Tell me to stop, he murmured against her skin. Tell me if this is too fast. Don't stop, she managed, her fingers working the buttons of his shirt. Don't you dare stop. So he didn't. They made it upstairs eventually, leaving a trail of discarded clothing on the steps. Damon's bedroom was all dark wood and white linens with windows that looked out over the darkened sea. He laid her on the bed with a reverence that made her chest ache, and then his mouth was on hers again, his hands mapping every inch of her skin like he was memorizing her. You're beautiful, he murmured, his lips tracing the curve of her hip. So damn beautiful. Ava pulled him up to kiss her again, wrapping her legs around his waist, and felt the last of her reservations dissolve. This was right. This was real. Whatever happened next, she wanted this moment with this man who looked at her like she was everything. They came together slowly, savoring every sensation, every sigh and gasp. Damon held her gaze as they moved together, his dark eyes intense and vulnerable in a way that made her feel like she was seeing the real him. Not the dangerous boss or the devoted son, but just the man underneath all of it. Ava, he breathed as they climbed higher together. My Ava. Hearing him claim her sent her over the edge, and she cried out his name as pleasure washed over her in waves. He followed moments later, burying his face in her neck and holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweaty and satisfied, and Ava had never felt more right about a decision in her life. So, Damon said eventually, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her spine, you're staying? I'm staying at least for a while. Then tomorrow we find you a better place than that hotel, somewhere you can actually live. I can't just move in with you. We've known each other less than a week. I'm not asking you to move in with me, though. The offer stands if you change your mind. He pressed a kiss to her shoulder. But I know a place, small apartment with a view of the water. It belongs to a friend who's traveling. You could stay there. You have an answer for everything, don't you? I told you, when I want something, I pursue it completely. He rolled her beneath him, settling between her thighs with a smile that was equal parts tender and predatory. And I want you, Ava Morgan, for as long as you'll let me have you. She pulled him down for another kiss, already feeling desire stirring again. Then I guess you better make it worth my while. His laugh was low and full of promise. That, Ava, I can guarantee. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Ava moved into the apartment Damon had arranged, a charming space in the old town with a tiny balcony overlooking the sea. She extended her stay indefinitely, using savings she'd been hoarding for a wedding that would never happen. She spent her mornings swimming and her afternoons exploring, slowly learning the rhythms of life in southern Italy, and her evenings belonged to Damon. Sometimes they'd have dinner with Serafina, who'd adopted Ava as a surrogate daughter, and was not subtle about her hopes for their relationship. Sometimes they'd go out to restaurants or bars or events where Ava got glimpses of the world Damon inhabited. She watched how people treated him with a mixture of respect and weariness, how a word from him could change the atmosphere in a room. But most often they'd be alone, cooking together in his kitchen or hers, talking for hours on his terrace under the stars, making love slowly and thoroughly, learning what made each other gasp and sigh. Ava learned that Damon was more than the dangerous exterior. He was thoughtful and surprisingly gentle with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. He read voraciously, mostly history and philosophy. He was devoted to his mother and to the handful of people he truly trusted, and he was surprisingly vulnerable when they were alone, letting her see the parts of himself he kept hidden from everyone else. She learned that he'd never wanted the life he had, that he dreamed of being an architect, of creating beautiful things instead of managing dangerous ones. that he carried the weight of his father's legacy and the expectations of their family like a physical burden. "But you're good at it," she said one night as they lay in his bed, her head on his chest and his fingers tangled in her hair. "Being good at something doesn't mean it's what you're meant to do. Then why do it?" "Because when my father died, I had a choice. Take over or watch everything he built crumble. Watch the people who depended on us lose their protection. Let our enemies think we were weak." His arms tightened around her. "It wasn't really a choice at all. That's not fair. You were so young. Life rarely is fair. But I've made peace with it. This is who I am now." For better or worse, Ava kissed his chest right over his heart. For better, I think. 6 weeks into her extended stay, Ava was at the market buying vegetables when she noticed the man. He was standing across the square, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. When she caught his eye, he didn't look away, just smiled slightly and raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. She hurried through the rest of her shopping and headed back to her apartment, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. It was probably nothing. Tourists and locals alike stared at the attractive American woman who'd appeared in their midst, but something about the way he looked at her felt different, purposeful. She mentioned it to Damon that evening, trying to make it sound casual. His reaction was immediate and intense. Describe him. I don't know. Tall, maybe 40, dark hair, expensive sunglasses. He was just standing there watching me. And when I looked at him, he smiled like he knew something I didn't. Damon's jaw tightened and he pulled out his phone, making a call in rapid Italian. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "What's going on?" Ava asked, suddenly nervous. "It's probably nothing, but I'm going to have someone stay close to you for a few days, just as a precaution." "Damon, you're scaring me." He pulled her into his arms. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to keep you safe. The man you described, I think I know who he is. Someone connected to a family we have certain tensions with. If he's here, it's not a coincidence. What does that mean?" "Tensions?" "It means there are people who would like to see me weakened, who would hurt those I care about to get to me." His arms tightened, and by now, anyone paying attention knows I care about you. The reality of his world came crashing in. Ava had known intellectually that Damon was involved in dangerous things, but it had felt distant and theoretical. This was real. She was real. And apparently she'd become a target just by association. "Maybe I should go," she said quietly. "Back to Boston. If being with me puts you at risk, no." The word was firm and immediate. "You're not leaving. And you're definitely not leaving because some bastardo thinks he can threaten what's mine. Damon, I can protect you, Ava. I will protect you, but I need you to trust me and listen when I ask you to be careful." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could take care of herself, but she also wasn't stupid. This was his world, and she was a stranger in it. If he said there was danger, she believed him. "Okay, I'll be careful. I'll accept the bodyguard or whatever you think is necessary." "Thank you." He kissed her forehead. "And Ava, this doesn't change anything between us. It just means we have to be smart, but it did change things." Over the next few days, Ava became acutely aware of the reality of Damon's life. There was always someone nearby now, a polite but watchful man who'd appear whenever she left her apartment. She saw Damon less, and when she did see him, he was distracted and tense. She tried to be understanding, tried to be patient, but she also felt the walls closing in, the loss of the freedom she'd been enjoying, and underneath it all was a threat of fear she couldn't quite shake. A week after the incident at the market, everything came to a head. Ava was walking back from a morning swim when a car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down and the man from the market smiled at her. "Ava Morgan," he said in accented English, "we should talk." "I don't think so." She kept walking, but the car kept pace with her. "It's about Damon Hale, about the danger you're in by being with him. I'm not interested in anything you have to say, not even if I'm trying to help you, to warn you about what kind of man he really is." Ava stopped and faced the car, anger overriding her fear. I know exactly what kind of man he is, and I also know you're trying to use me to get to him. It's not going to work. The man's smile didn't waver. Brave. I can see why he likes you, but bravery without sense is just foolishness. Ava, you're in over your head. Before Ava could respond, another car pulled up with a screech of tires. Damon emerged from the passenger side, and the look on his face made Ava's breath catch. She'd never seen him like this, cold and dangerous and absolutely terrifying. He said something in Italian, his voice quiet but deadly, and the man in the car palled slightly. A brief exchange followed, too quick for Ava to follow, and then the car sped away. Damon turned to her, and some of the hardness left his expression. "Are you okay? Did he touch you?" "I'm fine. He just wanted to talk." She was shaking now, the adrenaline catching up to her. Damon pulled her into his arms right there on the street, not caring who saw. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. What did he want? To scare you, to make you doubt me, to use you as leverage." He pulled back to look at her face. "It's a common tactic. Find someone's weakness and exploit it. I'm not your weakness. You're not a weakness. But you are the thing I care most about protecting, which makes you valuable to my enemies." His jaw tightened. "I won't let anything happen to you, I swear it." "What happens now?" "Now I handle it. Make it very clear that you're off limits." "Handle it how?" Ava asked, suddenly afraid of the answer. "You don't need to know the details. Just trust that it will be resolved." Damon. "No, Ava. This is my world, my rules. You don't get to be part of certain things." His tone softened. "I'm not trying to shut you out. I'm trying to keep you clean of this. You deserve that." That night, Damon didn't come to her apartment like he usually did. Ava waited up watching her phone until finally a text came through at 2 in the morning. "It's handled. You're safe. I'll explain tomorrow." She fell asleep on the couch, and when she woke, Damon was there. He looked exhausted with shadows under his eyes and tension in every line of his body. But when she reached for him, he came to her immediately, burying his face in her hair. "Is it over?" she asked. "Yes, they won't bother you again or anyone else I care about." "What did you do? What needed to be done?" He pulled back to look at her. "I won't apologize for protecting you, but I understand if this is too much. If you want to go back to Boston, back to your safe life, I'll arrange it. No hard feelings, no guilt." Ava studied his face, the exhaustion, the vulnerability hidden under the hardness. She thought about the past weeks, about how alive she'd felt here with him, about the way he looked at her like she was precious, about the life she'd left behind that had felt like a prison of routine and low expectations. "I don't want to go back," she said quietly, "but I need to know that this won't be our life. Constantly looking over our shoulders, dealing with threats. It won't be. What happened yesterday was unusual, a test by someone who wanted to see if they could find a weakness. I've made it very clear that you're protected by the full weight of my family. No one will touch you now." He cupped her face in his hands. "I can't promise my world will ever be completely safe, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you out of it, to give you a life that's as normal as possible. What if I don't want normal? What if I just want you? Then you have me completely for as long as you'll have me." She kissed him, and he responded with a desperation that spoke of fear and relief and love. They made their way to the bedroom, and he made love to her like he was trying to prove something, that she was safe, that she was his, that nothing would take her away from him. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the sheets, Ava said, "I'm not going anywhere, just so we're clear. I love you." The words came out rough, like he hadn't meant to say them but couldn't hold them back. "I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I love you, Ava, and I've never said that to anyone who wasn't family. I love you too." The words felt right and true and terrifying all at once. "I came to Italy to find myself, and instead I found you. I don't know how this works or where it goes, but I love you. We'll figure it out. Together." Together, she agreed. The next 3 months were different, calmer. Damon was true to his word. He kept his business separate from their life together, and Ava found herself settling into a rhythm that felt sustainable. She started teaching swimming lessons at a local pool, enjoying the work and the routine. She became friends with other expats and with some of Serafina's friends. She learned more Italian and more about the culture and slowly started to feel like she belonged. And every day she fell more in love with Damon, with the man he was when they were alone. Funny and tender and surprisingly romantic. He left her notes in Italian. He brought her flowers from Francesca's garden. He'd show up at her apartment in the middle of the afternoon just to kiss her and tell her he'd been thinking about her. 4 months after the incident with the rival family, Damon took her back to the small restaurant where they'd had their first date. They sat at the same table watching the sunset over the water, and Ava felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. "I have something to ask you," Damon said as they finished dessert. "That sounds ominous." "I hope not." He reached across the table and took her hand. "You saved my mother's life, and in doing so, you changed mine. Before you, I was existing, going through the motions, doing what was expected. But you showed me that there could be more, that I could want more." "Damon, let me finish, please." He took a breath. "I know we haven't been together long by conventional standards, but nothing about us has been conventional. You dove into the water without hesitation to save a stranger. I tracked you down because I couldn't get you out of my head. You stayed in Italy on a whim. We fell in love in weeks instead of months. Nothing about our story makes sense on paper. Where are you going with this?" He pulled a small box from his pocket and Ava's heart stopped. "I'm going where this was always heading, Ava. From the moment you walked into that hotel lobby with salt in your hair and fire in your eyes, this was inevitable." He opened the box to reveal a ring, simple and elegant, a single diamond that caught the fading light. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow or even this year, but I'm asking you to say that someday when you're ready, you'll let me be yours officially forever." Ava stared at the ring, her throat tight with emotion. "You're asking me to get engaged to be engaged. I'm asking you to choose this, choose us, choose a future that we build together, whatever that looks like." His dark eyes were vulnerable and hopeful. "What do you say?" She thought about the life she'd left behind, safe, predictable, slowly suffocating. And she thought about the life she was building here, risky, unpredictable, gloriously alive. There wasn't really a choice. "Yes," she said, laughing through tears. "Yes, I choose this. I choose you. I choose us." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Of course it did. Everything about them fit, even the parts that shouldn't work. They left the restaurant and drove back to his villa and made love under the stars on his terrace, the ring catching moonlight every time she moved. And Ava felt like she'd finally found what she'd been looking for all along, not just a place to belong, but a person to belong with. 6 months after that evening on the terrace, they stood in the same church where Serafina had been baptized, surrounded by family and friends. Ava wore a simple white dress and carried wild flowers from Francesca's garden. Damon wore a dark suit and couldn't stop smiling. When the priest asked if she took this man, Ava didn't hesitate. "I do." And when Damon kissed her, she tasted the salt air and heard the distant sound of waves and remembered the morning that had changed everything. The morning she'd saved a stranger's life and found her own in the process. "You know," she murmured against his lips, "when I pulled your mother out of the water, I never imagined it would lead to this." "No." His hands tightened on her waist. "What did you imagine?" "A thank you, maybe some flowers. Not falling in love with her impossibly stubborn, dangerously charming son and moving to Italy permanently. Life is full of surprises, Ava." "The best kind," she agreed, and kissed him again while their families cheered, and Serafina cried happy tears. Later at the reception in Damon's garden, Serafina pulled Ava aside and held both her hands. "I tell you that day, my family takes death seriously. I remember you saved my life and now you save his too. You give him reason to live, not just exist. You give him love." Serafina's eyes were bright with tears. Thank you for jumping in the water, for being brave, for choosing my son. I'd do it again, Ava said honestly. Every time. I know you would. That is why you are perfect for him. You are strong like water. Gentle most of the time, but fierce when needed. She pulled Ava into a hug. Welcome to family, Figlia mia, my daughter. As the sun set over the coast and music filled the garden, Ava danced with her husband and thought about how one moment of courage could change everything. How sometimes the best decisions were the ones that scared you. How love didn't always make sense but was worth choosing anyway. What are you thinking? Damon asked, his lips against her temple. I'm thinking I should have known that night at the hospital when your mother said your family takes debt seriously, that I was in trouble. Too late now. You're mine forever. Yours forever, she agreed, and you're mine. The best deal I've ever made, he said, and spun her under the stars while the Mediterranean breeze carried the scent of jasmine and lemons and the promise of all their tomorrows. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. Thank you for watching and being here.